Ms. Gambler, for the general public that may be listening today, what is the General Accountability Office?
The Government Accountability
Government
Office?
Accountability Office.
We are Congress's watchdog, Chairman. Our mission is to evaluate how federal taxpayer dollars are spent and to issue reports on the result of our evaluations to Congress.
And you've, the GAO has estimated in an April 2024 report that the U.S. government loses between $233 to $533 billion to fraud or improper payments annually, correct?
That's right. That estimate, Chairman, was focused on losses particularly attributed to fraud each year, but that was the estimate that GAO has made about the federal government's annual losses, estimated annual losses attributed to fraud.
So fraud is real.
In
It's
terms
not a
of
figment
GAO,
of our imagination. It's not racism to identify fraud where it exists. It is real.
There are absolutely cases of fraud affecting federal government programs.
So during the Biden administration, there were two programs I wanted to ask you about. One had to do with the so-called humanitarian parole process, and the other had to do with the placement of unaccompanied children with sponsors in the interior of the country. And I understand the GAO has made investigations of both of those programs. Is that right?
That's right, Chairman.
So I think it gets complicated, I think, for most folks to really comprehend, but there are people who claim asylum, that is essentially they're present in the United States or at the border, and they would qualify, let's say, to be a refugee if they were overseas, but they have some statutory basis for seeking admission to the United States. Is that your understanding?
That's right. There are different statutory pathways by which individuals, foreign nationals, can be legally admitted to the United States.
But in addition to that, and that's, I think Mr. Hankinson or Mr. Linderman pointed out, there were about 1.5 million pending asylum cases in front of the immigration courts that simply flooded our capacity to deal with that. But in addition to people claiming asylum, the Biden administration used something they called humanitarian parole to let huge numbers of people into the country. I think we've had witnesses testify before, Mr. Hankinson, you may have been one of them, that pointed out that the parole process is supposed to be done on a case-by-case basis, not on a categorical basis. In other words, people coming from certain countries get admitted without any further question. But what sort of fraud did you at the GAO find in the humanitarian parole process during the Biden administration?
Yes, thank you for the question, Chairman. In the review I mentioned in my opening remarks, we looked at three parole processes that were available to non-citizens who had U.S.-based sponsors. And in reviewing those programs, we found that through USCIS's own assessment of the program, of the processes, that there were widespread fraud indicators in those processes, to include supporter applications, including fictitious information or information that belonged to deceased individuals. And so through USCIS's own assessment, they found that there were fraud risk indicators in those processes.
So just to give people a sense of what the magnitude of what we're dealing with as a result of the mass of humanity that's come across our border, largely unvetted, using a bogus process of categorical parole. In addition to that, we have overwhelmed the immigration court system, 1.5 million pending cases. And Mr. Hankinson or Mr. Linderman, perhaps you would care to comment on this. I'm going to ask consent that a document from the Executive Office for Immigration Review Adjudication Statistics be made part of the record. That's from the Department of Justice. But here's what it shows, that in 2025 alone, there were 485,456 orders of removal. In other words, these are people who sought to have their legal rights vindicated in a court, and they simply lost. 277,000 of them were criminal aliens with final orders. In other words, they were ordered to be removed from the country, but simply stayed in defiance of the law. Of that, 267,000 were not detained. In other words, they're still running loose around the country. That includes 190,000 convicted criminals and 27,000 with pending criminal charges. And then there were those who were actually detained, which are 9,613. So it seems pretty clear to me that just the volume of people coming across the country has overwhelmed both the illegal immigration enforcement of our immigration laws and the legal systems that we've set up to try to determine whether people actually have a legal right to come and stay in the United States. And that's, of course, on top of the points that Mr. Linderman and Mr. Hankinson have made about countries many of these folks come from have no reliable records, so it's almost impossible to vet these people who are coming into the country, some of these countries.